Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this webinar on the Best of 2020 Fusion version 6. My name is Jim Smalley. I'm the Product Manager for 2020 Fusion, and I'll be taking you through some of the features and functions that we've developed during the course of the life cycle of version 6 so far, starting with the initial release back at Christmas of last year, and incorporating some of the features and functions that were delivered in the recent service packs during the course of 2018. So some of the things we're going to look at include the new rendering system, the impact that that has had on the way in which we approach lighting, our new name views mechanism, some of the additional catalogs that we've added in support of the new solution. Ceiling fixtures, also known as skylights and sky lanterns. Post-processing effects, how to add Photoshop style effects to designs after a render, and some various usability enhancements that we've added in relation to manual annotation, export views, batch printing, and so on and so forth. So let's just take a very simple design as an opening point, just to walk you through some of the new aspects of version 6. So we're opening a new room here. And to all intents and purposes, the interface is going to be more or less the same, but with a few modifications made since you might have seen Fusion before if you're going up from version 5 to version 6. So let's just look at specifically the view ribbon, and in particular the rendering area here. We have, first of all, brought the render options up to the top level. So you will see that the new render settings that we have available will have some commonality to the old ones that we had in version 5 and before. But the difference being is that they are now at the very top of the ribbon rather than via a gallery control. So we have a wireframe, just as we did before, and a white fill, where you see solid color is added into the view here. These are what we call our planning renders. So we have a wireframe, a white fill, a color fill, and a draft. If we go to elevation, those same render options are also available in that view type. So here I'll select a color fill, and you'll see the items with lines and color. And then we have a draft where the superimposed lines are not shown. These are what we call our planning renders. They are graphics card based, and we see these as the go-to renders, the fast renders for creating designs, adding products, and so on and so forth. Because they're so fast, we took the design decision to remove what was called the planning mode, and this was within this view ribbon. And the idea was the planning mode would allow you to drop down to super fast renders to make adjustments to a design when you were already in a presentation render. So because these planning renders are so fast in their own right, we decided that planning mode was no longer needed. We move into the perspective view. We'll start off in a wireframe, but we'll have two additional renders that are available. So you still have the planning renders, again, the white fill, color fill, and draft. But we also have what we call presentation renders. So we have a relatively fast presentation render that will be applied to a design, which, to be honest, gives a pretty good representation of light, texture, reflectiveness, and so on and so forth. We then have a more detailed render called Presentation Plus, which does take a little bit longer. I shan't apply it here, and that will give you extra passes, which will give you more detail. These two renders are governed by your processor, so that will be governed by the processing power. And the beauty of these particular renders are that it operates using what's called a background process. So what I'm going to do here is just split into two perspective views. And what you'll see here is simultaneously the renders are taking place. Now they're on a background process. So those renders themselves can be interrupted at any time, and you can switch to different render types in the different views. So here we have a couple of renders going on at the same time. Let's switch to a night view. We can easily go back to another render whilst others are taking place. Let's just go back to a single render. The other thing you notice is the functionality that we had before in Fusion is that we can interrupt at any time. In version 5 and earlier, it was quite difficult to interrupt a render. But using the new processing mechanism that we have, rendering is more easily controlled, and even when a render is part through, you can easily switch to another render, or even while a render is being generated. Just show an example here. You can start planning to move to other ribbons or to open other designs, so on and so forth. The other nice element about Fusion's rendering here is that you noticed if a render is completed and there's no change in the geometry, the render is actually cached. So here I am going backwards and forwards between two renders that have actually been generated, and the render is automatically reapplied. So let's go to a different design here. So we've just got a slightly different viewpoint. So lighting, what we have done in respect of render lighting is that we have created a very, very specific catalog called Universal Lighting. And Universal Lighting contains a range of lights that have been designed specifically to work with version 6. It's broken down into different categories. So we have ceiling down lights, ceiling center lights, lights that will appear under wall cabinets, ones that will appear inside cabinets, as well as others that will appear under worktops or under the base cabinets. So a wide range of lights that are available, and these have been specifically configured to operate with Fusion. So let's just give an example here. So I'm switching to a night scene. And if we go to our view, and we'll select all our lights. Here, obviously, it's dark at the moment because the lights are off. If we turn them on, what we're seeing here is that Fusion can now be rendered using purely the power of user-added lights itself. So this is very, very powerful. So we're actually, we're using a night theme, but we're using the power of all the lights in the design to illuminate the scene itself. However, it's also possible for those that are less keen to place lights that we can use only the power of a default lighting mechanism called the lighting rig. So again, I'm going to select all of those lights. I'm going to turn them off, and now we have no lighting within the design. But I can change my theme. To none. And when you select the theme of none, we're actually lighting the design with only an artificial lighting mechanism called the lighting rig, which will apply some lights in the ceiling, and it will ignore light coming in through windows and doors, and will allow you to light the design. So for those who aren't interested in adding specific user-added lights, this is a very powerful capability. And even if you are, this gets you in a position during the early stages of a design to get a very good appreciation of how the textures and colors are going to look. One important thing to underline is that in version 5 and earlier, the people would use lights in the advanced graphics catalog. However, that is strongly discouraged in version 6 because those lights have not been optimized for use in version 6. So I must stress how important it is to use just the lights within the universal lighting catalog in combination with the lighting themes that we have whether it be an evening scene like a sunset or a night scene, or however you wish to use it. But please do use the universal lights as opposed to those in advanced graphics. Okay, now obviously what you will have seen here during this sort of early appreciation of the renders and the lighting mechanism is we have been using some tabs along the bottom here. Now, the tabs that we have here is a reimagination, if you like, of our old name views system. For many, the name views system was a little bit complicated, and because it was hidden under plan, elevation, and perspective, respectively, it became very underused, I think, would be fair to say. So we took some inspiration from Microsoft Excel, where how in Excel you have the ability to create additional sheets using an add button in Excel and then switch between those respective sheets. And so what we did in Fusion is a similar concept. So what Fusion will do for you by default is create a main plan view and a main elevation view for each wall that exists within the design. So if we switch to our navigate view here, we've got 4 walls, and so we have 4 automatically generated walls. Wherever there is any tiling, it will also automatically create a tiling view for you. And wherever there are any installation symbols or worktops, it will also create an installation or worktop view for you as well. These are driven by default settings. So if you go to your File and to your Options area, the predefined views will obviously have settings that you can set for each of those, whether it be an installation view, tiling, or worktop views. And then also we have in dimensioning the ability to set your default views here. So that's in the dimensioning area and also for auto dimensions too. So all of those will be set in those respective areas. So let's take plan view as an example. So here I have a plan where I have essentially all my layers on display. And just to show you a dramatic example, if I were to hide all my layers, then of course all of my design items will disappear. That's pretty standard as before. So if I show my layers again, then the design will reappear. But the beauty here is I can create additional views here where initially by default the view, the name view, will follow the layer settings and the lighting settings of the main views. And these main views are all interconnected. So where you saw the asterisk in plan, so you saw an asterisk in elevation for the 4 views, and there is also an asterisk in perspective. So those are all interlinked. And so settings and changes that you make to layer views and lighting settings will populate and follow across each of those main views. If we go back to here, so we have now an additional view that's been created, a user-defined view. And I can actually choose to turn off the layer settings within this view. So when I turn it off, I'm then free to play with the layers here. So in this particular case, if I were to hide all the layers again, everything is completely disappeared, but the view in my main view is completely unaffected. So here's one I created earlier, which is essentially this view here, but with all of the decorative items removed. So you can have a main view showing all the decorative items across each of the views, but you can also create more practical views, say for an installer, a tiler, or a fitter, where only the bare essentials, the necessary items, are shown as opposed to the decorative. And these can be saved to the room, and when the room is reopened, they will be recalled. So, and of course, what you'll see here is in this particular view, the layers show that the decorative items have been hidden away. If I switch to this view, where the decorative items have been restored, so you see the layer item here. So obviously there are various different cases for this. Again, in this similar example. I've got an elevation with everything shown, but I've created one here where there's no decoration whatsoever. So again, in terms of fitting and installation, this is a much more practical view itself. So in plan and elevation, there may be some things you wish to show and hide, whereas in perspective, the motivation may be slightly different. So here in my perspective view here, this is our main view, which we know we have all of the decorative items turned on. And here we have a theme, no theme here, which means that we're being driven by the lighting rig that we referenced earlier. And here we have no lights turned on at all. But what you can then do is obviously create either a different viewpoint. So maybe we want to do a close-up here on the hob area. And that close-up, in this particular case, because it is pink in color, it's following exactly the same lighting and layer settings as the main view. So the layers are turned on in full, just as it is for the main view, and the lighting settings will follow the fact that there is a no theme selected here. However, obviously what we can do is then create variants. So we can create a variation of, we'll go back to the main view, where it, as you can see, it's cached that image because there are no changes. What we'll do is we'll create a variation of that, and we'll turn off the lighting settings. So that no longer follows the same lighting settings as before. So what we can do now is apply a theme, perhaps a sunset. And when that render applies to the theme here, we have the sunset coming through the window on the side here. And that gives you a different mood to the image, whereas in the main view, we're still keeping our lighting rig settings here. And of course, just in Excel, you can rename. So we'll change that to sunset, and that is saved and stored. So, and that can be referenced. All of these name views can be referenced in various areas of the product, and I'll show you some of the benefits and the advantages of those later on in the presentation. Other things that we can do with the name views are quite useful in the context of other areas such as the backstage view or exporting for printing or for exporting images as well. And it might be the case, for example, that this was just an experiment, this one with no decorations, so you can delete any of the name views that you've created yourselves. Or indeed, there may be certain elevations, as an example, where it's not giving you very much useful information. So here, wall 3 doesn't really show you very much. So I can right-click any of the name views and click on Hide, just as you can with the tab in Excel. If I hide that, it hides that away and then removes it from the interface at the bottom. And then when you're in areas such as the backstage print view or in the export view, then this will not be listed as an option for you to use. But what we'll do, we will unhide it, and there it lists all of the hidden views across all of the view types, and we hit OK, and now it's restored. Okay, so I'll just go back to the plan view. What it's important to underline is that a major exercise is undertaken to make sure that all of the manufacturer's catalogs that we produce have been reconfigured to operate with version 6. So all of the products added either from the file-based catalogs that we have or via the cloud catalogs that we have, all of those have been fully optimized to work with version 6. And certainly you probably may well have noticed recently that we've done a lot of work on enhancing our 2020 decorative items catalog. And one of the main areas that we've added, which has been very well received, is, for example, people that we can add. And obviously adding people to a design just adds that little extra degree of realism to that. So a useful advance. But of course, we have many other things such as pets or other inanimate objects that will help make the design look just so. Other elements that we've looked to enhance within our catalog offering is to really take advantage of version 6's new rendering system and create specific catalogs that will allow us to bring out the full material and textures of a design. What I mean by that is, for example, if we were to select our walls in our design, so I'm going to select by layer, and I'm going to select the walls from Advanced Graphics. Here they are selected, and what I can do via Change Material is I can take advantage of some of the catalogs that we've created recently, which have version 6 standards very much in mind. So here I have a Farrow and Ball paints catalog. So what I can do is, obviously I've got my tiled area here, but behind that I've got my white wall here. So maybe I want to apply a green element here. So I can search for green. I want a green-blue eggshell. I can select OK, and that will then apply to the walls. And as I say, it will give a nice finish. In this case, an eggshell finish, but of course we could have any texture operating behind there, and that will update for all of the walls in the design. Similarly with the floor, so we could, for example, go to Insert and select Covering, and go to the floor covering. And here we have a floor selected. But in fact, what I could do here as an alternative, I could go to our new 2020 Wooden Floors catalog and perhaps choose something different. So we have herringbone, could be an option here. So we've got a herringbone high gloss, or maybe a semi-gloss. Let's go with a semi-gloss. We'll add that to the design. Choose something a little darker. Hit OK. That'll apply it here. And then the design will update. So we have a slightly darker floor, perhaps in keeping with the darker walls. And hopefully you'll find that as you get used to these catalogs, so we have a Wooden Floors catalog, we have the Farrow and Ball paints, we also have some RAL and Pantone based catalogs. So if you have a particular color or material in mind, you should be able to find those now. Okay, so let's have a look at one of the other areas that Fusion has had some real benefits in our version 6.3 release, which was released earlier this year. So I'm just going to close this design now. I'm going to demonstrate to you the new Skylights functionality. We called the feature Ceiling Fixtures because, in fact, it doesn't just cover skylights. It also covers anything else that can be added to the ceiling. So I've got a very elementary room outline here. And what I want to do is I want to add a skylight. So here I have a new selector called Ceiling Fixture Selector. Works in a very similar way to all of the others, such as doors and windows. So if I click on that, it takes us to a new collection of items which have been added to our Advanced Graphics catalog. And within that collection of items, we have, for example, a flat skylight here. So let's add that to the design. It can be added in any of the views, just as doors and windows can. So we'll drag that into the design. And I'll place it in the middle, roughly in the middle. And obviously we have its properties here: length, depth, height. So let's just try and reposition that a little bit. So I'll make that 2000 for that side. And we'll make that 750 to that side. So that looks pretty centrally positioned. So we'll add that to the plan view. I'll keep it selected. And then when we go to perspective view, what you'll see is that in the perspective view, it's actually just as it would with a door or window, it's cut a hole into the ceiling. And you will be able to see, obviously, the sunlight. So if we go to our view menu, in this case, we've got a midday sun theme, so the sun is coming through. And of course, if we change the direction of the sunlight, so you'll see that update in the image there. Now, what we can also do with this particular skylight is we can simulate how high above the interior ceiling level it goes, which is easily done simply just by changing its height. So in this case, it defaults to a height of 100. If we changed it to a height of 400 and tap, then you'll get that interior sort of sense of depth to the skylight there as well. So you have a bit of flexibility and configurability there. Again, if I select the skylight here and I click onto the variable item properties, there are some other elements. And what you'll find across all of the ceiling fixtures, there are various things that could be modified. So in this case, we can modify the mullion thickness, the mullion being the strut in between the panes of glass. So let's make that a lot thicker. So we'll make each individual 150. So you can see the preview update here. And if you confirm, the image will update, and you'll see that they have become thicker. As I say, it's not just a flat skylight here. So we have also skylights known as sky lanterns or ceiling lanterns. So let's just replace that one with one of these. And so here we have the sky lantern applied, and the same concept applies. So this one defaults to 200, but equally we can make the depth different. So it is deeper, so that's fine. And you get a good view there. Also, then when you modify the properties, the option here is slightly different. So this is the height of the apex of the skylight itself. So perhaps we want to make that 400. And if you look here, you'll see the pitch become more of a peak, more of an apex there. So this, as I say, blows holes into the ceiling, lets light through, it will show the background. And this is a really good time-saving device, because previously what people used to have to do is basically create a gap with a series of boxes, and now this takes significantly less time in order to create a skylight effect. And these are, of course, increasingly commonplace in modern designs, perhaps with a flat roof extension, so on and so forth. So a valuable asset to version 6 for sure. So let's close this design, and then we'll open up another one. And in this one, I'd like to illustrate another one of the new features and functions that we added into version 6, which is the post-processing effects functionality. So if we were to go to a perspective view, and we'll see a render here that's already pre-rendered. This is a cached render. Normally it would take longer than that, but as I mentioned, a render where there's no subsequent change in geometry will be cached, and that's not only within the design session that you're in, but also for all subsequent sessions. So what you will have noticed here is we're in the view ribbon here, and when you are using the presentation or presentation plus render types, then a context-sensitive ribbon will appear called Effects. So if we click on Effects, what Effects gives you is some of the functionality that you might see, for example, in Photoshop, where you can apply essentially some post-processing effects to a design. So let's run through a few of those now. First of all, we have a pick white or a pick black point. This allows you to basically put some reference points in the design where the user can say, yep, I regard this as a black part of the image. So let's pick one here, so maybe the picture frame. And based upon that reference point, it will apply a different balance to the representation of the colors in terms of light and dark. So that already gives you a little bit of contrast. Let's Pick white does essentially the same thing, where you would pick a white element as a reference point as well. So let's now look at some of the others. So brightness and contrast, you may recall from earlier versions of Fusion. So if you are currently moving up from version 5, then this is the new location for brightness and contrast. Formerly, it was in the view area here. So brightness and contrast is pretty much as it is. And as you'll see, this gives you a live update. And even if the render was in progress here, you would still be able to apply the post-processing. Let's just illustrate that by making a very, very modest change to the viewing position. So it's setting the render off here. And as you can see, I can make the brightness darker or indeed a little lighter as well. So let's make that a little lighter. And then we'll apply some contrast here. And obviously the contrast will place greater emphasis on increase it. It will emphasize darkness and light a little more. If you decrease it, it will try and sort of balance everything out. So we'll go with an effect there. So we'll bring that brightness down, increase the contrast perhaps. Then we have shadows and highlights. And again, this is all about either emphasizing or reducing elements here. So reducing the value will obviously make everything more shadowy. Increasing the value, anything that is already lighter will obviously increase in its intensity. So you can see where the lights are here on the screen, they're becoming a lot brighter. Color temperature. Well, color temperature will allow you to create a slightly warmer effect by reducing the slider. So everything here now has a sort of a redder tinge. Or you can create a slightly cooler effect by increasing the color temperature, and then that makes it a little bluer. So here we're starting to create a sort of quite a sort of a moody effect here. And then color saturation. Again, increasing the value will increase the intensity, the brightness of the colors here. So the copper pans, you'll notice, have become a lot stronger in color. Or you can go the other way, and in fact, if you wanted to, full desaturation will leave you with a black and white image altogether. Any of the options can be reset individually. So I can reset the contrast here, or I can reset the saturation to put that to a middle point, or I can reset everything and I can bring it back to how it was. So really, it's down to the user for their own tastes to be able to increase or decrease values as they see fit. But it's a nice extra touch to perhaps add just a little bit of extra character to a design for the end result. Now, the nice thing about these is that these can be applied on a per name view basis. So any settings that you make here in the perspective view, here I can duplicate and carry them over. But in this particular name view, once I carry them over, I could, for example, fully desaturate here, and that work will be independent of the main view here. So again, you can create a whole series of artistic interpretations of a design with these little tweaks that you can make to the various settings, and that will allow you to obviously a little bit of creative latitude for the end result of creating your portfolios. And once again, any of these settings will be then transposed and can be picked up when you go to the backstage view. So let's look now at manual annotation. We made some very useful changes in here. So I'm going to open up the design we looked at a little earlier. This is the white gloss simple. And here we have an elevation view. And if you recall, we had previously had an automatically generated wall 1, which has got all of the decorative items on. We then also created one without any decoration at all. Simply removed the pots and pans and bits and pieces from there. Now, when in the past you wanted to add some manual annotation to what is essentially the same view, you had to basically copy and paste it or reapply it to those respective views. But in this particular case, we have two walls here where we would want to add some manual annotation. So let's do that. We'll switch to the annotation. We'll hit New, and we'll create some text called manual annotation test, and we will make on 2 lines. Okay, so interesting things to note about this dialog in version 6. We have a justification option here, so we can choose left, center, or right. We'll keep it on center. And then we have now shown in as an option here. And this will allow you to choose all of the walls that are valid in terms of being associated with the wall that you're adding. So we attempted to add this to the no decoration wall. We have some other walls here that are available. So we've got the tiling wall, the tiling view of wall 1, and the main view of wall 1. We'll ignore the tiling wall 1 view, and we'll just choose to apply it to wall 1, and we'll hit OK. So what we have here is the text appearing in wall 1 decoration, and the good news is that when you go to wall 1, so it is also applied to that view as well. I can double click on the annotation in any of the views, so I'm now in wall 1, and it confirms where we were on that. So for example, if I now want to remove it from this decorated view, or from the no decoration view rather, then I can hit OK. It stays here, and it will disappear from this view. So we have full flexibility here, which is great. Again, when we go back here, the other element that we've got is the ability to assign at source, when the annotation is created, to a particular layer, which is functionality that we previously only had in the layer dialog here, and that was only possible by selecting the annotation after the event. Now, of course, you can add it, define that layer at source. Okay. So we've spent a lot of time talking about named views in various contexts, and it is very important. It's really one of the sort of the center points of where Fusion version 6 is founded. Not only the new rendering system, which in itself is very important, but the new named views mechanism helps us in so many areas. So we'll take a look at now the export view area. And here I've chosen to export to a bitmap here. This is our default option. And the view that I was previously in was that wall 1 elevation. And what you'll see, obviously, here is a lot more than you would normally have seen before. Namely, all of the named views that currently exist for this particular design. So we have an elevation wall 1. Let's also select the plan, and we will select one of the perspective views, perhaps the close-up here as well. So what I can now do is choose to export these views. So I'll choose background export here because I have one of those is a presentation render. You'll see the render names all in brackets here, so you have a good indication of what we're looking to add. And I will add these now to a exported files folder that I previously created and hit save. Now in this case, the background processing will kick in for the presentation render, and in a while we'll come back and have a look at those once they've been created. But essentially, via that mechanism, we now have the ability to choose multiple views all at the same time, which is really, really powerful and is a great time-saving device, because I'm sure, as you recall, in version 5 and earlier, what we had was a situation that you had to choose them one at a time, go back to a new view each time, back and forth between the backstage view. This has saved an awful lot of time. Similarly, in batch printing, so let's go to the print view here. We've made some really good enhancements to batch printing. So when the print dialog comes back here, what we will have is the view that we were in, so the wall 1. But again, if we wanted to do some batch printing, we've updated the interface here to consolidate the batch print selection process. So this dialog here used to be a separate dialog to allow you to choose either the on-demand batch printing. It's now been consolidated, so you can make a decision between doing on-demand batch print sets or working with one of your predefined batch print sets. So let's choose on-demand. And some of the things that we've done here to improve the solution, obviously now we have a list of available views. which is great. So we'll choose our elevation wall 1. We'll add that there. And we might wish to use our plan node decoration as an example. So we'll stick with those for the moment, but obviously you could include as many as you like. And a lot of the functionality will remain exactly the same as before, the ability to choose the orientation, printing to paper or to file, so on and so forth. But what we have now is some additional functionality, which is to, obviously, we can choose a printer now. So if you have multiple print jobs, you can choose to do it either to a particular installed printer, which is one option. And within that, you can then choose the tray type that will go to that printer. Or you could choose to do an independent exercise for one of the other views, either to a different printer, or perhaps that is something that you wish to generate as a PDF, as an example. So now, within the batch print set itself, you have the ability to choose specific destinations for each of the output that you're choosing to do as part of the exercise. Again, very, very powerful. It gives you a lot more choice and flexibility. So let's just have a quick look at our folder where we have the example images. We'll come back to the area in a minute, our exported images, exported files. And here we have our white gloss simple close-up, our white gloss simple plan, and our white gloss simple elevation there as well. So let's just quickly open those so you can see them. There's one, that's next, and that's next. All done as a single batch print job, or a batch export job rather. Okay. Next up, let's just take a look again. We'll go back to our elevation view here. Some very useful functionality that's been added to the product. Again, in the past, when you would select a particular item, you would generate the items ribbon. And in the items ribbon, obviously, you had full flexibility to change all manner of attributes of that particular item, whether it be a report category as an example, whether it be its length, depth, and height, whether it be any of the attributes of that particular item. Before version 6, you were restricted to do that on a single item at one time basis. And what we've done in version 6 now is the ability for you to multi-select items and certain elements now that become available to you in terms of modifications. So just for fun, in this particular example, we might, if these were configurable items, we might choose to wish to adjust the height. So here we have two items selected. They both have the same height, so the height is 720. We might wish to increase the height of those to 750. Fusion will update, and it will increase the height of those. And these are all modifications that you can do in all manner of respects. So if we go back to the original settings here, you'll see that anything that is in common is shown. Anything that is different, so here we have an item that is a 600 unit, and we have an item that is 1,000 unit here. So obviously here it can't show a common length, but if you were to wanting to modify each of those, so if we were to, say, for sake of argument, make each of those 500, then it would apply the change to each of those. Obviously this example, a slightly nonsensical example, but it proves the point. So multi-selecting allows you to change any attributes for multiple items all at the same time. Finally, just show you some of the enhancements that we've made to Fusion Help. So within Fusion, much like Microsoft Office, we've added a tell me what you want to do functionality, whereby if you type in an entry, maybe you can't remember where a particular menu option is, so maybe style details you're looking for. So here we are, default style, just typed in st, and this will allow you to select default style for that. So tell me what you need to do. It gives you a quick means of accessing or calling a button that perhaps you can't recall where it is. So click on default style and it generates the style details dialog. So we've implemented that exactly as it is in the Microsoft Office suite. What we've also done is implemented an updated Fusion help system. So the F1 key will launch a very comprehensive Fusion help system where obviously you can search on any particular item. So perhaps search on the panorama functionality in Fusion, and it will take you directly to information on the 360-degree panorama. Fusion's help also operates in a context-sensitive mechanism. So for example, if you are looking at default style and pressing F1 will generate a particular piece of information explicitly on changing an item's style, rather than taking you to the landing page and you having to search. So if you want to show the menu, then you can get back to the home area or revisit any other areas of the help system itself. So full flexibility there. Also, what we've added in version 6 is a link to the 2020 Fusion Knowledge Center. Rather than the help system, which kind of tells you where things are, the Knowledge Center is an area where our support team is publishing a series of articles in order to help designers perhaps with common problems that they have within Fusion. So again, if we search again for 360 Panorama, there will be a series of articles published where you can get a little bit more insight into what you need to do in the context of particular features and functions. So in this case, in the panorama, it's telling you about all of the pre-configuration, so how and where to set up your email addresses for both the organization or the salesperson and the end customer. This is something that's relatively new, so it's evolving over time. So obviously, if there are any elements that you feel that you would benefit from, do get in touch with the support team, and they may well create an article based upon your requirements. Finally, just to remind you, this has been in since earlier versions of Fusion, but we do have a link to the 2020 Fusion user community, and that takes you a direct link into 2020 Fusion, so you can see any announcements that have been made by 2020, whether it be by our support team, sales, marketing, or myself, or in the area here where you can raise any questions or comments, and maybe other fellow users of Fusion will post comments or replies to those as well. So it's not just an interaction between the end user and 2020 Fusion, it's also an interaction between other users of Fusion as well. Finally, whenever we do any updates, we do install a What's New guide onto your desktop. So the What's New guide is always up to date with every version. So you should have a shortcut to when you install version 6, a What's New guide, which goes to quite detail, not only on the features that I covered during this presentation, but also on other elements of Fusion, some of the more minor features perhaps that I haven't had time for in this. But it's very informative, so do make a point of reading that in parallel with downloading the new version. So when you're getting to grips with version 6, obviously this is the sort of output that you can expect to be able to create. So if we take a look here are some examples of designs that have been created using version 6. I'll just cycle through them. Here's one where we've got some great reflections here from our glossy door cabinets, and it's also decorated with some of the new 2020 Fusion people from the decorative items catalog. Here we have some others as we cycle through. So various colors, various materials, various textures. As you can see, some of these take really good advantage of our new flooring and wall materials catalogs as well. And they all take full advantage of our lighting with themes. And even the materials here, for example, the apples in close-up, really give a very good effect. that concludes the presentation. If you need anything in addition, maybe some more training or some more information, obviously you can contact our training team here in Ashford, or look for more information in the Knowledge Center or via the user community. I think it's important to say that version 6 is just the beginning of our new rendering revolution for Fusion, and indeed that won't be the only area of focus. We are looking at obviously further developments as usual. We develop new features and functions, every year, so do look out for new versions and see what exciting new features and functions they will bring. Please do look at the 2020 Spaces website. That's always a good place to keep up to date on new advances in Fusion as well. And also follow us on social media for any weekly tips and tricks. So thank you very much for your time, and I hope you found something useful. Bye-bye.